Okay, well, I think we might start off. Anyone else who's joining in a little bit later on can catch the replay. Just so you are aware, this presentation is going to be recorded. So if you'd like to watch a replay of the recording or share it with someone who wasn't able to attend today, please contact myself or Siobhan or Mark and Glaro from Taggle, and we'll make sure the link is shared for you to do that. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Stephen Ty. I'm the director of Tyware. Tyware has been the developer of the MyWater system since 2011, so almost pushing on 10 years. And we are now, of course, working with Taggle Systems in the continued development and support of the MyWater system, as well as the systems previously called MySewer, and a few other bits and pieces as well. So the purpose of today is to show you a presentation of the next version of the MyWater platform. As you might have heard from a previous discussion, a previous webinar, that there's going to be a rebranding of the MyWater product. Currently the MyWater product being available in Australia as well as overseas, but because of international reasons of being able to secure that name, particularly in the United States, there's been a need to rename the product. Now, that doesn't mean that you will need to change the name of your domains. We still own the same domains, the mywater.com and the mywater.co domain. It doesn't mean you need to even refer to it as anything other than MyWater. We know what you're talking about. The name is well known in Australia and also in the Asia Pacific region. So there's no real concerns with that. If you want to keep calling it whatever you'd like. In fact, in the case of some of the implementations of the customer portal, you've used your own name for that as well. So that custom name that you set up, we've got instances of that. We've got Mackay's, which is MyH2O. We've got other ones called My Smart Water in South Australia. We've got City West Water using Tapped In, and other sort of versions of brand names that are used. In some cases, it's simply called MyWater. In other cases, it has some sort of custom name. So no need to change that. No need to change any of the branding that you have. And I'm sure that we could do a little bit of a count during this presentation, the number of times I accidentally call the product MyWater when I should be referring to it as the Aqualus water product. I'm sure you can keep a tally of that, give me a number at the end. Although in doing so, give me the freedom to be able to refer to the product before this version as being MyWater and everything going forward as Aqualus water. So without further ado, we're going to show you a demonstration of the fairly high-level functionality of the Aqualus water product. But as has hopefully been communicated, the Aqualus water product, when it's released, is going to be released fairly soon. This has been fully tested on our side. When it is released, there won't be a need really to sort of log people out. There won't be a downtime. And that's primarily because what we're showing you is very much a user interface upgrade as opposed to some sort of technical back-end change. And that upgrade at the moment is planned for this Friday. If it's not done this Friday, and certainly you'll be made aware of it, we'll let all the customers know, but it most likely will be Friday or if not Monday next week. There's no technical reasons why we can't do it, seeing as we've been testing this now for a number of months. And to be perfectly honest, trying to coincide its release to the public with the branding change from MyWater to Aqualus water. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my desktop so that we can show you what the product will look like, show you how to get around it. We have also separately prepared a training video that's a little bit more detailed perhaps than what we'll go into today. I'm hoping that we can cover off some of the larger parts of the changes today, but there is going to be another video in addition to this recording. That other video will be made available as soon as possible so you can share that with some of your other staff. But the goal really from today will be that to try and create some confidence that everything that you're currently used to using in the MyWater system is now available in the correct place in the Aqualus water system, and just to show you where to find those things, as well as to show you what's changed and what's been improved. And when I've done training or when I've done sales demonstrations on the MyWater product before, I must confess that even though it was functional, I was always a little embarrassed as soon as we logged into the system. What you saw on your very first taste of MyWater was actually something which was created in 2011 and hasn't been changed since. So, and as some of the Mackay people who are online probably would be aware, that was made also quite quickly just to be able to get something in front of the users to see what the data looked like. Now, with almost 10 years of experience in doing this, we have a much better idea of what's important for you as a water utility to see as soon as you log in, as well as a much better take on how to represent that data in a useful way. So we'll do that now. One last thing is there is a comments sort of chat thing inside Zoom. I have everyone muted, and it's not that I don't want to hear from you, it's just that we have a lot of people online now. So if you do have a question, please feel free to throw that into the chat box. I'll pause at certain points just to see if there are any questions, and I'll try and respond to them there. So just put those into the chat and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm just going to do a share of my screen. Okay, just want to make sure I can still see the chat. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to kick off. So this is our new Aqualus water branding for what is the meter data management system. Some of the styling that you'll see in here actually hasn't changed. We created the very first user interface that we created for the MyWater product didn't really have a name, but it's the same user interface that you would have used to see on your home dashboard. In fact, I will just quickly show you what that looks like in case you're not familiar. So this is what your home dashboard previously would look like. And when we then progressed from the current version of the meter data management system, which we sometimes had called MyWater Private, to then a customer portal, which is sometimes called MyWater Public, that product had a brand new user interface design, which we actually called behind the scenes, it was called Blue UI. Now, once that was released, we then found that in the customer portal for the MyWater product that the branding was far superior than what we had here. The styling also was far more flexible and also did a much better job of utilising the screen real estate that we had on there. So we actually commenced a process as long ago as 2015, 2016, where we started to bring that same user interface back into the MyWater meter data management system. We have done that in certain sections. That is why when you're looking at inside the MyWater product, you would see something like the DMA functionality, which was styled slightly differently with different looking buttons. So we had started to bring this functionality in section by section. What we needed was a big push to just get rid of it completely, which focused on the home dashboard. So that's what we see here. And the best thing I can do is really just log in to this process just to show you what's changed. So this is now the home dashboard for the Aqualus water product. This will be what you will see when you log into your instance of the Aqualus water product in the not too distant future. I'm going to go through each of the sections that we see here, explain what they're there for, but really the main thing that I want to point out in this is that this menu structure at the top from a user perspective is actually identical to what you were using in the customer portal. So if you've ever used the MyWater or MyH2O customer portal, and just for the sake of interests, I will bring that up and actually show you my house. So this is the customer portal for Mackay. Log in. I have to blur out my address seeing as this is being recorded, but this is the same portal that we see at the top, the same menu approach. The actual colouring is different, and the customer portal is certainly colouring and style is specific to Mackay's usage of the customer portal, but it actually is identical beneath, under the skin. Now, this just begs a question: can you rebrand the Aqualus water product in your usage of the Aqualus water product, which is only for staff purposes? The answer to that question, unfortunately, is no. When you use the Aqualus water meter data management system, you'll see the same interface. If we allowed everyone to change the colors and styles and schemes of the staff portal, which is really where 80% of the work happens when you're using the product. It really makes training a whole lot harder. It makes it harder for users to be able to switch from one instance of the system to others, because we do have some clients that use multiple versions or multiple instances of the MyWater or Aqualus water product. So on the home dashboard, the first thing we'll just quickly go over is the main menu. So rather than having a menu structure, this is the old version, which was here, where you would click into an item to then see the details beneath it. Everything is now available from the main menu. So you can access the main menu from every or any section of the MyWater Aqualus water system. That's one. You can also access the search function from any section inside Aqualus Water. So rather than having to keep pressing home to go back to the main menu or pressing home in order to get to the search function, you can do that from anywhere. So that's a big improvement. Now, under the main menu itself though, the structure is identical to what was there before. I think we might have renamed just one or two of the reports just so it was a little bit more in alignment with what that report was supposed to do. But apart from that, everything is still under the same structure. So you still see reporting as the first group, and then under here, reporting is the first group. AMR analysis is the first subheading, and AMR analysis is the first subheading. So you won't find any new links in here, or maybe you will. Maybe if you have a look through there, maybe this makes it easier to find something that was already there that you just hadn't found before. But you won't find anything new here in terms of functionality. Where we've invested most of the time is this home dashboard and also the property dashboard, which I'll show you soon. If you want to change your password, you can do that under the My Profile option on the main menu as well. If you want to access all of the options beneath help, whether that's the user manual or whether you want to see the history of changes against the system, you can still see those there. And lastly, there's logout. Okay, now the last thing I will point out is the search function. And the search function at the top here, when you click on it, it just brings up I guess a mouse over type control that allows you just to simply search straight in here. So if I was to do a quick search for Elm, then that will bring up the search results for Elm, Elm Street. If there was a customer whose last name had Elm in it, it would bring that up. So that's a quick search that will run the search on the street name. It will run it on a meter code, an AMR code. It will run it on an assessment number if you type that in, and it will run it on the customer's name or part thereof. So these search results are quite, the results themselves that appear are also more comprehensive than what's there before. I should point out too that this is our demo instance of the Aqualus water product. Some of the data that's in here is a little bit rough. We just use this for training purposes. When you have this deployed to yourselves, you'll see far more relevant data. Another thing I should just quickly mention there, if I've just done a search for the word Elm, and assuming that's the street address, you'll see that from the moment that I press the search button, then that loads the search results almost less than half a second. If I was to do that same search from the main menu here and do a search for Elm, we should find that it takes, actually that was quite quick too, but sometimes that takes a long time. Also in the search results, we show some additional fields, just because most of the time when people are doing a search, they're usually wanting to go from here to the property dashboard. Well, we've just lifted a couple of the most important parts of the property dashboard to put it into the search results. So that includes data quality, or sometimes we refer to that as data continuity. That's the percentage of the meters at that property or that assessment that are delivering the expected number of reports per day or per hour. So in some cases that's 24 reports per day, in some other cases it's 48. It just depends on what sort of smart meters and AMR devices are configured against that property and the rules attached to them. We also have an indication as well as whether or not there is actually a leak and how big that leak is. So if I was to look at this property down below here, it actually has a pre-existing leak of 109 meters per hour. The last and the third option that we see here is a 7-day usage. So we can see again, just in terms of comparison, we can obviously see that this property is using a lot more water than the other properties in this search result list. So going straight from here to the property dashboard is then a case of either selecting it or just clicking on the row, and that will take us to the property dashboard. And that's pretty much the last section we'll show you as part of this demonstration. To do a more comprehensive search, we go to the search function, click on the maximize button, which then brings a larger version of the search results, field. So this is where it gives you more options, more like the search field that we had at the top here, which had a few extra fields to put certain things in. So it might be you want to search by the owner's name specifically, the property type, maybe you want to search for all of the cemeteries, the subtype, rating type. Water subtype is a new feature, which we'll probably explain a little bit further at some future stage. We might just send an email with some explanations on that. But that's because we can now configure, and you can configure within the data that you supply to us through companion data loading, a subtype which might be something like residential or non-residential consumption or commercial consumption. If you have raw water consumption, those water subtypes can now be configured. And when you see a lot of the reports, like those which were on the home dashboard, which we haven't shown you yet, we'll actually be able to have those reports showing the results separated by those categories. For example, if you were to look at the highest 5 top users or 5 highest properties in your across your network, then having them all lumped together with commercial and residential customers might be a little pointless. So now we've separated those so that you can see the highest residential versus the highest commercial. Or if you've got recycled water customers, those sorts of things can all be separated through some of the reports. So lots of other options here. You can search by a meter model or an AMR model. You can search by the size of the meter. Some of these options were there before and others weren't. So another thing that we can do from our search function, again, we click on search, and if I was to pop in an address such as South, so there's South Street, oops, I pressed that too fast. If I go south and click on this option, which is the map marker, so hopefully you can see my mouse on there. So there's a map now that the results will be presented as a map. Now again, our search results, sorry, our underlying data in this instance of Aqualus water isn't quite perfect, which is why it's just positioned that in the wrong place. But we can just see some items listed here. Again, another thing to point out is I'm pretty sure the map search on the old version of My Water was also particularly slow, and this runs those results a whole lot faster. Okay, so that's our search function. The next thing we'll just get into is what's actually visible on this home dashboard and what's it telling us. Just before I do that, just in terms of the headers and that sort of stuff, if there's any questions, just type them away and I'll pause just for a moment just to see if there's anything that anything I've lost anyone with. I can't see anything, so I'll just continue. So the other items which are on the home dashboard, again, I need to, I guess, I suppose, toot your own horn when you have the chance to, but I'm quite proud of how fast this runs, and I had nothing to do with it. I've got a lot of smart people here who do all the hard work, so my thanks very much to them. But if I was just to press the F5 button, which is just to refresh this page, you'll see how long it takes for all of these charts and controls and maps to load. So if I press that now, we can see that the whole thing's pretty much loaded within about a second. If I was to go to the home dashboard on the existing version of the customer portal, and I was to load that, then similar sorts of time, but we've improved the performance of what's actually delivering the data. At the same time, we're actually giving you more data. So I guess I like to say we've sort of been able to have our cake and eat it too by being able to deliver more data, but actually do it a whole lot faster than we could before. Now, at the top left here is a new panel, this panel shows you the top 3. We can actually configure this to show the top 5. I think we've just got them all configured to 3 at the moment. But the top 3 properties that I've most recently looked at. So this is unique to you or each individual user of the system. As you make use of the system and you say, maybe you do a search for, we do a quick search for Elm Street. We'll find the property that we want. Maybe it's this one here. We'll select it. We go to the property dashboard. Now, we'll come back to this a lot later, but if I go back to home, we'll now see that 2 Elm Street is at the top of my list because it just remembers the last one that I used. And that's useful. Oftentimes we find that maybe it's a customer services operator who's talking to someone on the phone with relation to water consumption at their property. So they'll go and do a search, bring up the property dashboard, and maybe they'll hang up and do something else, or maybe they'll have to jump around a few different sections in order to solve the problem. Well, we'll remember the last one that was at the top there, stick it to the top left so that you can go and access that again without having to kind of do another search. So just as trying to put the most frequently ones that you use at your fingertips. Below that, we have a panel which has a number of different warnings. Now, if you remember, in My Water, we had 3 items shown here. So we had, in this case, the highest water users, we had the highest possible leaks, and we also had this other one, which was late pulse reports. Now, we've gotten rid of this bottom one here completely, just because it's not really that relevant to put it on the home dashboard anymore. We have another way of accessing that. But the highest water users and the possible leaks are now in this section under warnings. And we have also added another option. So firstly, option number 1, warnings. The warnings that are visible here are the high consumption across the last, the previous 48 hours, with a little chart to go along with it. But with relation to that particular variant of the report, as I mentioned, if you have differentiated your customers based on use type, so if that's residential consumption or commercial consumption, you'll actually see one of these options will be, you'll actually have 6 icons down below here. You'll have 1 for residential and 1 for non-residential. So you'll actually see different groupings in there as well. So this is high consumption across all users. That's how it's been configured for now. The second option is our top 3 or our top 5 leaks. And the third option is new, which shows the biggest general increases in consumption. It looks at the 7 days prior to the 7 days prior for each of the properties that you have and where there's been the most percentage increase in consumption, with some caveats, because obviously if someone used 1 litre yesterday and or last week and then used 1,000 litres the next day, that's a fairly large increase percentage-wise, but really isn't statistically relevant to what we want to show here. So these are only ones that have passed a certain threshold and maybe worthwhile investigating why there has been a significant increase in consumption. Another thing I should mention, for each of these little panels that we have with variants in here, if we start to devise new and better reports that contain new insights, they'll all just be loaded in here. So we may add variants. We have a few other ideas for things to include, but we had to draw a line under what we were doing for all of these variants for now. We got a little bit of feedback from a couple of clients whilst we were doing testing. That actually has fed into this as well. So but we do plan on adding more into each of these spaces as well. Now, the next one over the top right here is now our network charts. Now I'll just go to chart number 6, because chart number 6, even though there's a whole lot more color on this chart, is actually very similar to this chart here, which was daily water consumption. So it's, is it daily? Yeah, so just this one is showing you the last month or so, sorry, last 60 days. This version of the chart was showing you something similar, but this is a far more comprehensive chart. What you see here was, as we put our mouse over, is we are actually stacking and showing each of the schemes independently of one another. And the schemes that we are showing, which are determined from the data that's in your system, we're stacking those one on top of the other, so you can still see the same total, which is the top of the chart, but you can also see proportionally who's using the water within your network. The yellow line that we see here is the historic average for this particular or this utility. So the historic average actually just looks simply one full year back in the past from where we're at now, and shows the same consumption during that same period for comparison purposes. So back to these other charts, all of these things, you can jump around them by pressing the number down below here, or you can use the arrow keys left and right. That's the same controlling system that we actually have also in My Water, you may remember. So, or in the customer portal. We also use that in a few other spots as well in the existing My Water system. So we have a very similar way of controlling these variants of these charts, just like that here. Okay, so just going back, I'll explain what each one of these does. So firstly, the first variant we have here is a DMA comparative mass balance. And the mass balance, where you have a DMA configured, we have a number of clients that have DMAs configured, you'll see one of these bars for each one of your DMAs, and you'll also see them containing a percentage loss. So this just gives you across every one of your DMAs an idea of how they're actually performing in terms of non-revenue water. And one of the best features that I think of anything that's on this chart is any one of these items that we see here are actually all links that allows you to drill down to show what that data actually means. So if I was interested in this and I say, well, that's quite abnormal. So in the last 7 days, if we've lost here, we've lost 59% of the water that's there, I can click on that and now it's taking me to the DMA functionality so I can visualize that. And you can quite easily visualize that gap over the last 7 days, which is the proportion of consumption within the DMA versus what water was pushed into the DMA from the network. So we go back to home. You may also just notice that it always returns to the same chart variants that are active from what you had active before. So if you really don't care about any of these variants and you only like to show this one is the one that's most important to you, then you can set that variant, and then the next time you come back here, it will always show the same one. So there's another DMA variant. Sorry, this one is showing you suburb total consumption over the last 7 days. It just gives you an indication of how much water is being consumed within each suburb. The next variant just shows the same thing, but it's stacked. And the reason it's showing you general is that if there were multiple types of consumption, such as residential, non-residential, you'll actually see those as a proportion within that chart. The next one shows you comparative consumption per meter. So again, this is just doing a comparison, and it also is doing it actually by water use type. Again, we've only got one water use type, which is called general in this instance, but you'll actually see them stacked side by side to compare how much water is being used per meter. This is yesterday's water consumption. This is, I guess, in a way, similar to this chart that you see currently in My Water. And you see a similar shape, but now you actually can see which of your schemes is actually contributing to it. So this water scheme here, this sort of cyan coloured scheme, which is Shelbyville, that actually contributed to a very large chunk of water consumption between, say, 8:45 and 10:15. So this just allows you to work out where is your water being consumed on an hour-by-hour basis across the whole network. We saw this next one, which was the total 60-day consumption. And number 7 is your ongoing report on total 60-day customer leaks. So this is the aggregate consumption of every single meter that's reported to be leaking. So if you want to do, and I know that some of the utilities do a lot of reporting on overall over your whole water utility, how are leaks going? How are you going in terms of trying to resolve customer leaks? Well, this gives you a running total for how much is leaking. The number of times that I've been asked by, say, a water utility, because they're doing some sort of press release, and they want to know, well, how much water has been lost to a leak in the last month? Well, this actually just gives you a running total, which you can actually use this data directly. And that's quite useful. So this is obviously something which we weren't really presenting this data before, even though it was there. I should mention that this particular chart control, in fact, all of these controls can all be maximized. So if you want to see this on across your whole, your 35-inch monitor or whatever you've got there, then you can do that across the whole thing, and just as all these other ones do as well. So I'm just going to pause just for a moment. I just noticed that there was a comment there. Just a comment in the system. I just want to go through the comments and just make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, just reading those comments, sorry. So there's just a question there about training. So in terms of training your own staff, what we'll be doing is we can utilize this webinar, as well as we have created a full video that goes for about 45 minutes that covers everything that we're showing you now, sort of, straight from start to finish. What's changed? Where do you find this section in the new system versus the old system? In terms of more specific training to your customer for your users, so whether that's just for a small group of your water utility, we would just tend to sort of push that out through this process, identify if there is a bit of more of a training need. To be perfectly honest, our assumption is that there probably isn't a need for people to train from the point of view of, are they going to be shocked by what they see so much that they can't use the new version of the system? More so, if there's new functionality here, which wasn't there before, how do you get the best benefit out of it is probably more of a better question. Because the interface is still following the same design patterns that most people are used to, we hope people can take it up. That being said, we probably won't ask this question now. I'll probably wait till the end. If you believe that there's a need, that you believe this is going to cause more of a shock than what we've expected there would be to some of your staff, then we just need to have a discussion about that. We'll probably just save that towards the end. Jason's asking about the cards, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Okay. So the next option that we see below here, this is another set of charts. So I'll just go back to the first option. Whereas the top chart, network charts, these are giving you overviews of consumption and consumption type activity across your whole network. The activity charts, though, really relates more to how are you and your staff using the Aqualus water product. So the first thing we see here is just a running total of all notifications being sent. So in this particular case, the running total is showing only really one every second day. So that's not too interesting. But if you're sending alert notifications, which might be any one of a number of different notifications. So it might be that you use the customer portal and notifications are being sent to, excuse me, to your customers by way of a link notification for via email or SMS. It might be that they have high usage alerts configured and they're receiving those also by email or SMS. There are a couple of different variants on different alerts through the customer portal. All of those will be added up, and all of those will actually be categorized here based on what type of alert they are. Excuse me. We've also got notifications which the Aqualus water product itself will send. These are the same ones that have always been there. So again, it's when you push a notification to a user based on their consumption, you might be sending them an email, an SMS, or a letter. So they can all be reported in here. So if you were to open up a typical water user's, open up your instance of the customer portal, you would, let's start again. If you open up your instance of Aqualus water, you would actually see all of the notifications that had been sent prior based on what type of notifications had been recorded. In the same way as I said before, if you were to click on one of these links, you would actually be taken straight to all of those notifications. In the same way, even on one of these charts up here, I didn't mention, for an hour-by-hour consumption, you could actually see, well, who was using water at 3:15 a.m. yesterday? Well, you can click on that link and it will show you all of that consumption and who's using it and where. And that's just loading for me now. So that's all of the consumption, including if there's a leak being reported. So coming back down to the activity chart, so we've seen notifications. The next option that we see here is data processing. This isn't showing anything for us, but where you have data flowing in from your companion system. So that might be Pathway by Infor, it might be Civica Authority, it might be Practical Plus, it might be Technology One, it might be GenTrack, it might be Magic, and I've run out of rating systems, so I think I've covered them all. So when that data is coming into the Aqualus water product, and that happens behind the scenes through a process that we call companion data loading. Some of the customers have this fully automated. Some customers have a process where they might trigger this off manually once every couple of weeks. So as that flows in, you'll actually just simply see the results of that data here. You'll just see maybe we processed 16 rows yesterday, or maybe we processed 10,000 rows yesterday. Okay, so that may or may not be all that useful to some people. It definitely would be interesting to people who are doing integrations and that sort of stuff. But that's fine, we'll keep moving on. This next chart is very similar to the one we saw up above, which showed you the customer leaks by volume. This is now simply just showing you how many meters actually have leaks. So at the moment we've got historically there was 76, it dipped down. And for each one of these dots, again, we can click on that to see, well, how many, who are these 68 leaks that exist? So we can click on that to go further. Now this chart's going to be quite useful for us in a situation where you are doing or in the middle of a rollout. This process or this chart will allow us to be able to report on the number of ISAs that are being completed over the last 60 days. So if you're expecting maybe your contractor is doing this rollout, or it's a contractor with Taggle, or maybe it's data right, or maybe it's you're doing it with your own staff, or whatever you're using for that. And in this particular case, there could be potentially multiple vendors and stuff that could be doing the rollouts. The completed advices, you'll actually see them here. So you could see if there was 100 done yesterday or 120 done yesterday. Again, you can click on all those ones that were done on the 23rd of April to see actually what they were. Okay. Now the next, and you might also be doing that, sorry, through your customer, through the Aqualus Water mobile application, or the My Water mobile application, which is, I guess we would say, is the best way to be able to do your rollout and your maintenance of your smart meters, especially since it's free as part of the Aqualus Water product. But perhaps the other way that you could be doing it is that you might be using the API functionality, where you've got some other process where you're capturing all of the advice data. These meters have been replaced with these meters, these AMRs have been replaced, etc. And having that done in a separate system and using APIs within the Aqualus Water product to receive that, you'll actually see them here when they're processed. Just as there's always been a spreadsheet upload functionality, and there's always been a process for you to simply manually record those through the advice section. The next variant here also doesn't show us a whole lot, but when you're doing physical meter readings, and this is perhaps the most likely situation would be that you're using the My Water, Aqualus Water mobile application to do that. But you'll also see those here. So these are physical readings that have been done in the field. They've been captured and recorded in here. And again, you can drill down on one of these to see what they were. I've worked very closely with a number of you, but especially with Mackay Council, with the rating team there, or the revenue team, when they've been doing meter reads, and even in Mackay's case, where they have 44,000 smart meters out there, they will still read approximately 2,000 to 3,000 water meters every single 6-monthly billing cycle. And a lot of that's for auditing reasons. A lot of that's because some of the AMRs are no longer reporting. Maybe someone's hit them with a lawnmower. Maybe someone's taken them off and hid them in their shed. So there's always reasons to have to physically read water meters, even with all this technology that's there, even if it's just for a sanity check. If you're using an integrated smart meter, such as a Taggle Honeywell V200 HT, or even some of the other integrated meters that we support, such as a new meter from Water Group, and there's a few other flavors of meters out there. Integrated meters do have a whole lot less maintenance from a data point of view, because you no longer have to worry about how the meter is interfacing to an AMR that has to be physically inserted into it. So you do have fewer data issues really with those types of meters. Certainly fewer visits to the field to try and work out what's going on. But even for those, there will never be, well, I'm sure there will be at some point, but we don't see in the near future that there will be integrated smart meters for every single situation, because you're still going to have mag flow meters at 100 millimeters that won't have an integrated radio and would rather just provide an interface to an AMR that can do that transmission radio process for you. So, and even in those situations, it's useful to be able to do some auditing just to confirm that you're happy that the readings being reported from the meter through the radio network are the same as what's physically on the dial. So physical readings, you can see the history of those here. These are meters with no reports. So a no report meter, we also refer to that as in terms of data continuity. If you, over the last 60 days, have had no reports from a water meter in its radio, then the likelihood will be is that you'll need to investigate. Maybe it's because it was installed and maybe someone put it underneath a steel lid because it's in a driveway and it hasn't been sort of fitted correctly. Well, that will cause it not to report. As I said, it failing outright for whatever reason, whether it's interference or whether it's run its course of life on its battery or whatever, it's the possibility, you'll be able to see those on this chart so that you can go and investigate. And again, most importantly, you can click on those to go and see where they are, what they are, and then go and investigate. You'll see as I put my mouse over here, this actually is a stacked chart. It shows you more than just one vendor. If you have 5 vendors, I think we've got one vendor with 4. I think, sorry, one customer with 4. I think there's another with 5. So you'll actually see them all stacked. So not to sort of pit one vendor against the other, but if you've got, say, 1,000 smart meters from 5 different vendors, and you're having an issue with one of those vendors that they're not being reported, which could be even as simple as their process for sending files have failed and we're no longer receiving their data, then you'll be able to see them visualized on the chart here and then go and work that out with the vendor to try and work out what's happening. As always, the MyWater product originating in Mackay is deliberately designed to be vendor neutral as far as the technology, and is also designed around what the utility needs, not what the vendor needs. So as much as we get the benefits now as being the MyWater Aqualus water product is now part of the Taggle family, it's still kept in a state and will still be kept into a state where it's designed to give you the tools to manage your network operations, your network consumption. It's not designed to mask situations where you've got smart meters in the field that aren't reporting, where it might cast poorly or look poorly on the vendor that's doing it, whether it's Taggle or anyone else. It simply gives you the data so that you can make those decisions for yourself and to investigate and see what's going on. Okay, the next one that we see are meters with zero consumption. So just as a zero consumption meters are actually of high importance. In the last 18 months, we've spent a little bit more time looking at these, particularly again with Mackay Regional Council, because whereas the absence of any readings from a water meter because something has failed, that's definitely important. You do want to investigate. But after they got on top of those sorts of issues, got on top of things like leaks, although I don't think you'd ever really get fully on top of leaks, now became apparent that there are a number of meters out there that were reporting reliably, maybe once every hour as they should, but reporting zeros and as in no consumption. Now, there could be a good reason for that, which is that the residents or a property just simply has no one there to use water. But there are also some other reasons why that can be actually a problem. So one might be that the meter itself has failed, but the radio and the AMR that's fitted to it has not. And we have seen that the best example that we've found was from Mackay, where their second largest water user in the network had their main meter fail, and I guess within about 72 hours it was identified through using these sorts of processes to identify that the meter had failed, but the AMR was still reporting 0. So it was going from using megalitres of water per day to using nothing, and of course that's certainly abnormal and worth investigating. The last option that we see here just shows you outstanding meters flagged for investigation. There's a small function within the property dashboard that allows you to mark a meter to be flagged, and this just gives you an indication of it. The reason you mark it to be flagged is really up to you. It's just a management tool, because it also allows you to search for those meters specifically if you're doing a full search. So you might do include those that are flagged for investigation, and that option is usually available in most of the reports. Okay, moving over to the cards section. So the cards, again, it uses very similar information to what's in these charts, but it's going to give us a single value so that when you log in the system, you can just see, well, what's going on with my meter reading exceptions? What's going on with my AMR advice errors? So each of these items, I suppose, are just giving you a single number that you can investigate. They will color code, so if you've got no issues whatsoever, then everything will be green. So green being a good thing. There are some situations, so 0 consumption is set to yellow. That's not necessarily bad that you've got that many. It just may simply mean that you don't have anyone in some of your properties. But this one here, which is meter reading exceptions, as I said before, if you're doing physical audits of readings in the field and you have recorded that 11 AM yesterday, this water meter had a reading of 100 kilolitres, but according to the data that we've received through whatever process, we've said that at 11 o'clock yesterday that the reading should actually be 10 kilolitres, then that's going to count as what we call a meter reading exception. And so it is really incumbent upon you to actually investigate that and determine what's going on. Is the issue because someone's recorded it as being a 1 litre per pulse against the meter configuration when it actually should be 10, or maybe it's the other way around? Was the meter reading when the whole thing was installed physically, was the meter reading that was recorded right at the start actually wrong? Has someone simply done a meter reading in the field and that meter reading was wrong? And we've seen plenty of examples of that. So investigating that process, when we do training for the My Water system and the Aqualus water system, then you'll be able to, you've always been able to run this report, but we've often found that people don't tend to look at it and not realizing exactly what it is that's going on here. But you can see some examples here where the manual meter reading that was taken, on this case, the 20th of the 4th, was 609 kilolitres, but we calculated it as 594. If you're using the Aqualus Water mobile application, you'll even have examples of photos that go along with it. So even in this particular case, we've got the photo that goes along with it as part of the process. That's 3631.97. So it's been recorded correctly, which is good. And usually you can use these photos and a combination of other things. Sometimes you can avoid going out to the field to actually try and investigate, mostly because you might find that someone has written something down wrong at some time along the way. So that's meter reading exceptions. Another thing is quarantine tags or meters. So that process hasn't changed, but we do analyse the data we get from every vendor. And if we see something that looks a little bit strange, for example, if it's a V100 meter, no matter what brand tag is attached to it, AMR is attached to it, if we get a decreasing number over time, which indicates that there's a negative flow occurring, then we'll always mark that as putting into quarantine. Those devices should not happen. Even if the meter does spin backwards, it should never cause the count to decrease that's coming from the tag, because they only ever count up. Some meters do have backflow and have backflow processes, which is why things like the V200 HT and also the new meter integrated meter from Water Group have different business rules behind the scenes of whether or not they get quarantined. But investigating a quarantine meter is certainly something you need to look at. Usually it involves a conversation with the vendor. Another reason that might be caused, and actually I won't go into those reasons, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about with quarantine meters and you want more information, just let me know, and we've got some documentation that just explains what that's for. You can find that same documentation actually underneath our help. If you go to the user manual and search for quarantine, you'll find that too. The next option here on the cards is zero consumption. So similar to the variant we had up here before, and zero consumption is just visible there. There is actually, might be a little bit difficult to see. There is actually a chart behind here too, like a little spark line. So you will see that also being represented behind the scenes there, just as a little mini chart. The next one are the number of meters that are flagged for investigation, and at the moment that's showing 0. We've got the number of meter or AMR advice errors. So we said that there is a process where you have water meters that are, the water meters are, changes are occurring in the field for meters being replaced, AMRs being replaced. Well, when that data arrives in the system, then we'll also analyze that. For example, if you've said that meter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 has been replaced, and that's been stored in the field, but then once it's synchronized with my water, Aqualus water, if Aqualus water then says, but I have no idea what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is because it doesn't exist in my companion data, well, that will wind up as an error that needs to be investigated. And just like these other things, clicking on that will take you straight to those errors so they can be resolved. The next one are no reports received, which is again the same variant of the report that's up here. Meters with current leaks, there's currently 60, and there's recent notifications that have been sent, which recent being, I think, either yesterday or 2 days. Okay. So the Mack reporting is the next thing we'll just show you. So firstly, what we'll show you, these will really become far more apparent when you look at real data for your instance. The suburb report is perhaps the main one that will load when you first log in. So this just gives you a suburb by suburb comparison. Again, if you have multiple types of consumption, whether it's residential or non-residential, you'll actually see 2 versions. You'll actually see a full different set of numbers here. One will say residential consumption per suburb, one will say non-residential. And that therefore means that you're not going to have 2 different pieces of information sort of crowding together. So here we could see, for example, that if I was to look at this suburb, which probably isn't the best example because there's only 1 meter there configured, let's just pick a different one. So this one has 55 and 7-day usage was 169.5 kilolitres, which works out to 1.2 kilolitres per day. Compare that, say, with this suburb, which averages 10.2 kilolitres per day. Okay, so with any of these, that just gives you the summary, and the map itself runs quite fast. You don't need to give us suburb data. We already pulled that suburb data from ABS or some other public sources for anywhere in Australia. Though I would mention that we recognise too that suburbs don't represent necessarily the best way for how you would create demographics across your whole network. If I was just to look at this, I know that these DMAs are far more rural based, which is why there's only 1 configured at the moment around this suburb. And maybe that's not representative of, you don't necessarily want to compare this suburb here with the suburb that's in the middle of a city. But still, the reason we actually added this was because the next report, which is DMA functionality, is potentially far more useful because it now looks at your whole network. But we recognise that not that many of our customers have utilised the DMA functionality in terms of creating them. Now, if you haven't, if you don't know what it is, again, we're more than happy to spend some time. Maybe we could do a future webinar just on DMAs. But I think there's a lot of clients who have used MyWater who have the potential to create DMAs even without putting in a network meter, just by simply using the DMA functionality from the network, which is managed DMAs. You can create a DMA, you can draw a polygon around a certain part of your DMA, which looks like that, which then includes all of the meters within it, and now you can compare them one against the other. In this particular case, the color coding is actually representative of that loss. So this DMA has 3.9 megalitres going in, is only using 1.7 megalitres, and therefore the 7-day loss is 2.2 megalitres. The next variant just shows you mass balance changes. It just compares what's the changes in the mass balance over the last 7 days. So in this potential case, that there's a 6% change in this DMA. This one has a 0% change in the DMA for the 7 days prior. I'll just find the other one that's here, whereas this has a 25% change. So moving along, these are meters across your network that you aren't receiving any data from at all. So you can click on one of these, select it, it will take you to the property dashboard. The next one are meters that you are receiving some data from, but you're not receiving great data from. So they don't meet the threshold. Usually it's set to 70% of expectations, which might be 16 reports per day. So if you're not receiving 16 reports per day, then that will appear on this chart, this report. The last one that we see here just gives you an indication of the highest water users across your network, and it shows you that consumption based on with a color coding to try and compare some with each other. Okay, so that just gives us to the end of the home dashboard. Were there any questions on that before I move to the property dashboard? I'll take that as a no. So we are going a little bit longer than I expected. I apologize for that. So I'll move to the property dashboard, and I'm going to select this option here, this recently viewed property, which is L50 South Street. So this is our new property dashboard. Whereas before you may have seen, I probably talked too long, so it's logged me out. So if I was to bring up, say, this property. So this was our old property dashboard. You'll see here that there are multiple AMRs recorded and there are multiple meters, but we actually aren't showing them on the chart. We have a limit on this chart to 3. Well, if I was to open this one up, we actually now see, I believe that the maximum in here is somewhere around 25. It's just however many it starts getting crowded. So perhaps the first thing to mention here is that this is the raw chart. It's the equivalent of this chart here. And this raw data chart shows you, for example, this water meters consumption. All of these dots don't necessarily line up because the transmissions might be all over the place. They might be on an hour by hour out basis, but they may not be on the hour. So this just gives us the raw data usage in litres. We can maximize this chart as well. So we can have a look at, we can easily skip from this chart to the week before and the week before and the week before. You'll notice that that runs a lot faster than it did before. And another thing what we can do, which is quite important for us, is that we used to limit how much you could display on the screen. Well, now we've taken that limit away, so you can see multiple weeks, multiple months. It starts looking a little bit crowded over the time, but all of that data just loads without having to refresh the browser. So the performance on these charts is far superior than what we had before. So we'll just close that one. And that's the water consumption. We can also put this into litres per minute. If you were familiar with this functionality before, litres per minute was actually available as an option before, but you had to go looking for it. This is your old meter dashboard. You go up to your water usage in the last month. You then had to put it onto non-summarized data and then change this to 2 weeks only, because we could show only 2 weeks of data on this chart. So now it's just available to you here. If you want to download and look at this data through your spreadsheets and things, you just click on this download button here. And that's the same for this chart as it is for the one below it. Up above here, this little panel is very similar to what was there before. We've just styled it differently. This panel on the top right is very similar to what was there before, and also looks very similar to the MyH2O metrics panel as well. So you can just scroll between those up here just to show those metrics. We have this new panel that's been added. So now in this box, you will see every single meter that's currently active against the, this particular property that we've selected, including ones like this one that has no AMR, and gives you a representation of the meter reading as well as the data quality percentage. Any one of these meters that are listed here, we can then drill down on to see what they are. Again, in order to do that before, you would have had to click on the meters little eye icon button here that would take you into that section. and then click somewhere else in order to get that data, but now it's available on the dashboard for you. And I'll show you that meter dashboard in a moment once we've just finished this. Below here, we now see water consumption. The My Water home dashboard had a number of charts, had 5. This one here, which shows you daily data. This one shows you daily water consumption, pretty much the same chart, but doesn't show you it with a dollar value. Hourly water consumption on average, and weekly, and then seasonal water consumption. So we've gotten rid of all 5 of those charts and just put them into the same one chart. And this is actually quite similar to the chart that you see underneath the, on the property dashboard inside the customer portal, which is to say that you can see the data in daily or hourly. You can change the time series so that you can see hourly consumption over time. We can change it to show it by cost, which is turned on for some instances of the Aqualus water. You've already had that configured. Some of you don't show this data by cost because you don't supply tariffs, and that's perfectly fine. But if it has been configured, you can see that the chart will look the same. It's just now giving you values in terms of cost. We can see the data quality over the top. So data quality is just a representation for across all the meters that are visible in this aggregate view. What's the data quality look like? So I'll just turn that off. What we can also show, if you remember up here, we've got 5 meters potentially contributing to the consumption on this chart. Well, on this chart, we can now stack the data. So now you see consumption across all of them. And if I scroll back in time, you'll just see some variation for those, just as I can do that by going back to a longer period of time. You'll see that there's also a little chart controller underneath here. So if you do put in a large time period and you want to hone in on something specifically, you can just drag the controllers for that, just to look at that one day. And as I said before, if you were to click on that one dot point, then that would show you a report that just shows how the consumption was occurring just for that one dot point. You can also show them overlapped, which looks a bit busy, but at least you can see which of the meters are using the most water. And you can see specifically this one here as having lots of consumption, but then dropping off sometime around February 20. The last thing that we can show on here, and I'll just have to check, I can't remember if this particular property actually has had a historic leak. But this was, I'll just put it to unstacked. This was at the request or suggestion from Mackay after we spent some time with them, is that we now have an additional series here. This red line actually shows you on a day-by-day basis what the estimated leak value was. So that if you had run the leak report on that day for this property, then you would have actually seen that this property had a leak of, in this case, 2,000 litres. So that's quite useful because it shows you as a proportion of total consumption. You can actually see that, well, right now, there is still a leak of 308 litres. Let's just zoom in on that a little bit. So a leak of 308 litres, which means that I have to try and work out which one of these actually has a leak. But yeah, so it shows those. Actually, normally you should see a little icon here if there's a leak too. I have to try and work out why that's the case. It might be that we've just fiddled with our data too much in order to make the reports work. Same as before, you can maximize this chart as well as downloading its data. These 4 panels below really haven't changed in terms of their functionality from what was there before. That's the same as your least recent notifications, your AMR change history, your meter location, and any outstanding jobs. So those 4 panels are still there. They've just been stacked. And we have also designed this so that if you don't have a widescreen monitor like I have, it doesn't do a perfect job, but it will cater for that by moving some of those objects around. So, so now it's just stacked them one on top of the other. The home dashboard functions the same way. Okay, so the last thing that I'll just show really for here is that we also have a meter dashboard. So you can drill down on any one of these meters to show the meter dashboard, which is the same dashboard you see here, but of course focusing on one meter. Some of the old controls that were on the other one, for example, we have changed. You used to click on the owners, which did a little pop-up. Well, that's just our modal control that does the same thing. The functionality at the top right here is pretty much the same. You can still do a customer notification relating to a leak. That's just been restyled, but has the same functionality. But the last thing is, if we were to look at one of these water meters, we can click on the eye icon. This brings up the new sort of meter modal. This replaces this control, which looks like this, which is a little messy to find what you want. So this now appears as a full screen modal. On the left-hand side, we see the details of the water meter. The right-hand side, we see the details of the AMR, if there is one. We can see things like what's the reading and when is that reading configured for. When did we first hear from it? What's the rate per pulse? On the left-hand side, we can see some of the stuff that may have come from your rating system, which might be its inlet size or the rate code and that sort of stuff. We can see the history of whether this meter has been flagged. So we can actually flag it for investigation and write a note. And we can unflag it again later. All fixed. So that's just a different way, a new, better way of doing that if you use that functionality. We've also put in the zero consumption history. This functionality was released about 12 months ago. Again, with some consultation with, primarily with Mackay, where you can record that you investigated that this water meter actually has valid zero consumption. So if you are doing an audit, you can record to say, oops, press that too many times, that I actually investigated this now. The outcome was that there is valid zero consumption and residence looks to be empty. And that becomes then a parameter that's available to you through other reports. When you do zero consumption reports, that will actually exclude this one from those reports if you check that box. Okay, there is also a configuration for these. If you actually set these as being fire service meters, that has the same effect. You can set the fire service meter through the advice. Speaking of the advice, if you were looking at this and you saw something was wrong, maybe you saw this and said, hang on a second, it's not 10 litres per pulse for that AMR, it needs to be 5. Well, you can go straight to that advice now from the operations menu here. So we can modify the AMR advice. Now we're in the advice form and we can change that 10 litres to 5 and save it. So previously you would have had to go out of that function, do a search, find the advice, make the change. So the other options that we see on here, we also see the history of all the readings. Firstly, we see the current calculated reading plus any physical reading that may have been done. Maybe the physical reading was done has come from your companion data through, say, from Civica or wherever. It might have been that you used the MyWater mobile application to do that, in which case there may be an image that goes along with it. You see the reading over here. There might have been some notes recorded along with that reading. And that just gives you a better way of doing it. You can also go straight from here to a form to manage those changes, including if you recording your own manual meter reading, which might be necessary to fix certain situations. Okay, almost at the end here, we can see the original and related installation images. You can see the configuration of the meter, which might be things like hazards, might be the GPS position. It might be if you've set some sort of threshold for the leak, you can save that here. You use this if it's a continuous water user and you want to exclude the first 200 litres of water usage from any leak reports. And the last option here just shows you for this meter what assessments actually have this meter configured. If it's shared across multiple assessments, then you'd be able to link to that and it would actually go and show you those assessments. Okay, so I've gone through the property dashboard. There's nothing really else underneath the property dashboard that I don't think I've covered or that has changed. I'm just checking. Yep, so that's all been covered. So what I'll do is I'll give you the opportunity just to ask some questions and just type away and I'll be happy to answer them. Now, So on the property dashboard, it does, yes, highlight that the owner has signed up to the public portal. I don't believe on our demo data that we've got anything that would show that to you, but you'll see an icon here which looks like a world. And that icon, if you put your mouse over the icon, it will show you a little text pop out that would, I guess, show you what that means. Anything else? Maybe another thing to check with is just to see if anyone in what you've seen there, if you're quite concerned about whether receiving this view functionality, is maybe just worth mentioning. If you maybe mention to me privately, if you don't want to tell the whole world, but just let me know. For valid zero consumptions. So for valid zero consumptions, is there a report that identifies this? I believe reporting zero consumption report. Now for the, where is it? No, where is it? Okay, exclude valid zero consumption. That's the option there. You might be right. It actually is only allowing you to report on those that, to exclude those that have valid zero consumption, as opposed to only including those that have had a valid zero consumption recorded. So it's possible we don't have an option for that just yet. So that might be worth raising and us having a look at. Okay, so yeah, this video will be available. Handout notes. We haven't prepared anything. If that's Mackay, I'm guessing that might be Andrea or someone else. So maybe just make contact with me and just see what you think might work in terms of handout notes, and we'll see what we can put together. Any other questions or comments at all? I'll just give you a few more moments. I appreciate that we've gone just a few minutes later than planned. Okay, so Darren just asked, has the customer portal changed? No, so the customer portal is identical to what it was before. The way that you connect, if you're a staff member and you connect to the customer portal, then a staff member would have previously connected to the customer portal through this option here, which says redirect to system name. It's not just MySQO, it might be something else. So under here, we would use the option to connect to there. Gee, I don't see it. I'll have to find out where it is. Mark Hallowell's just said, well done. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we'll finish up there. By all means, keep in contact either with myself or with Mark Aglaro or Mark Hallowell. If you've got questions about what you've seen, just let us know. And as I said, if you had some significant concerns, our plan is to release this on Friday. Please let us know fairly soon if you think that that's a crazy idea and you're not ready. And let us know and we'll address that. It might be that we just release it to most on Friday and just wait till Monday for everyone else to do the rest, but we'll definitely want to respond to that. We're hoping that it won't be too much. We're hoping that the benefits will outweigh the risks of bringing in a new user interface to the home dashboard for them. Thank you, Darren. Okay. Thank you all, and we'll try and make this video and other videos of the other video that we had prepared available to you as quickly as we can. And yeah, keep in contact. See you next time.